How about that, guys? Hey everyone, it's Movie Lover 120, and I'm here with yet another franchise ranking, and this franchise ranking is going to be for all the Indiana Jones films. Oh, and don't mind him in the background. That's just my Yorkie. That's my Yorkie Skookum. Well, that's my Yorkie. But he's just going to be in my room for this video because, well, yeah. But anyway, I will be ranking all four of the Indiana Jones films from best to worst. So, to start it off, let's go with what is, of course, my favorite film of the franchise, and what is obviously the best one, and definitely one of the best films of all time, and that is, of course, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Man, this basically began around the time when George Lucas, known for Star Wars at the time, conceived the whole Raiders story around the same time he was coming up with the idea for, well, of course, what would be Star Wars. But since he was preoccupied with the latter, he decided to give the synopsis to his friend, and was soon to be the director of the series, and that was the director, Steven Spielberg. So, once it was released, once he was finished with, like, Star Wars and the first two Star Wars films, Star Wars New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and after Spielberg was getting fame with Jaws at the time, they went and crafted Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it was a very phenomenal film. It's basically set in 1936, where an archaeologist has to get through a bunch of Nazis to this religious relic which is central to plans to dominate the world. He has to battle against his phobia of snakes and his vengeful ex-girlfriend known as Marion. And Indiana Jones ends up being in constant peril. He makes Harold's breath escapes at every turn in what is probably a great adventure. He's sent by the United States government to find the lost Ark of the Covenant and stop it from falling into the hands of the Nazis. Now, this is actually my favorite film in the series, because it has a very interesting premise about an archaeologist trying to find this Ark. Well, we all know it's the Ark of Covenant, before the Nazis get their hands on it. Memorable action sequences, a phenomenal score from John Williams, especially one of the best theme songs of all time, and very awesome fights, especially like the bar fight scene. And there's some touches of humor, despite mostly kind of being a serious film. Some very well done special effects, specifically on the ghosts, spectacular performances from Harrison Ford, Karen Allen, and pretty much everyone else. And of course, the very infamously terrifying scene where God unleashed his power on Belloc and the Nazis and kills them. Now, of course, there's obviously some bad qualities, because, well, every masterpiece is going to have a bad quality. And that is for, of course, well, sure, I mean, even if Indiana Jones didn't find the Ark of Covenant, the Nazis probably still would have been killed anyway. Like, even this one Big Bang Theory episode, which I'm not a big fan of that show, but even it kind of points it out. But other than that, there's not really any problems with this one. This is easily my favorite one in the series, although I love the second and third ones just as much, but this is still the one that can never really be touched or be outnumbered, and in my ranking, I would give it a flat-out 10 out of 10. It's still one of my favorite films of all time, and it's still one of the best history films of all time, and it's still one of the favorite Spielberg movie of all time. Now, and since it was a success, Spielberg and George Lucas decided to go do another one. On kind of like with Star Wars, they also decided to go make Indiana Jones a franchise. Around that time, though, but technically, Spielberg decided to opt for a prequel because, well, he didn't want to rehash the Nazis again and wanted to do different villains. But on the bad side of things, Spielberg and Lucas were going through a really tough time, like with divorces and stuff, and some pretty dark times for them. But that was for the next installment would be the prequel, which is technically it's the first one. It's set a year before Raiders, and that was for none other than Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Now, I put this one in third place. It's not as good as Raiders, and it's not as good as Last Crusade, but it's actually still a pretty good follow-up film, nonetheless. Even if it's not really a sequel, but it's still kind of a follow-up because it's kind of the second installment, which will be chronologically released after Raiders. And this one It's set in 1935, which I've already explained. This one, Indiana Jones, along with this really annoying singer named Willie Scott, and his new sidekick Short Round, crashed on this plane into India from Shanghai, China, and they end up having to go on this trail to this dangerous adventure to Bangkok, India. This time, instead of an ark, he goes in search of the magical Sankara stone, and ends up uncovering this ancient evil that threatens all who come into contact with it. Now, the good stuff, of course. It's an amazing prequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark, since Indy this time has to go to India. Unlike, well, in Raiders, he had to go to Egypt and uncover the Ark. And ends up finding this dangerous evil. Stole some great fight scenes, like when he's fighting the thuggies to save Willie Scott, the fighting in the underground quarry. Stole some very good special effects. Stole very good performances, and stole an amazing score from John Williams, despite it being a much darker score. And Balaram is actually a very terrifying villain at the same time, since well, he can basically, what he's known to do, like everyone remembers, is he basically could take out the heart of this person he's sacrificing, which is still one of the most terrifying scenes in childhood history. Like, I remember that part. That part scared me as a child, and it still does to this day. It's still some great action scenes, like the minecart chase, and the final battle on the wooden bridge with the thuggies and Malram is epic. Now, there's of course quite a few bad qualities, such as Willie Scott is very annoying. Unlike Marion, who is a very good love interest, she's very annoying. She does nothing but scream, and Short Round isn't really exactly a good written character, but he's not bad. Plus, I would definitely take him over Mutt Williams. And the film can be very terrifying because, well, as a kid, it was definitely one of the darkest films I saw at the time, since it basically deals with things like sacrifice, voodoo, specifically like where, and well, we all know it basically created the PG-13 rating along with Gremlins. It's not really PG rated, but if it were released today, it would definitely be PG-13. That was how. So if everyone wants to know how we got the PG-13 rating, this film and Gremlins are why. And despite being a bigger budget, there are a lot of blue screen shots. So, yeah. But all in all, how would I rank this film? Well, I would rank it an 8 out of 10. Not as good as Raiders, not as good as Last Crusade, but it's still a good sequel, and it actually isn't afraid to go darker than the first one and go a little more mature, which I love. It's kind of like with Revenge of the Sith, which also tried to actually go a little more mature than the other Star Wars films stuff. It's kind of like I'm on the ranks of that one. But then, 5 years afterwards, we got what is easily my second favorite Indiana Jones film and one of my favorite third installments of all time, and that was for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I absolutely love this as a great sequel to Raiders. It's one of those times where the third installment is actually not the worst. First, what happens in this film, basically, what I love about it is that it literally begins with how Indiana Jones got that fedora hat. That's after he, well, lost his first time when he tried to get that cross back to this museum, but one of the robbers was actually loved how he tried to get it back and loved his bravery, and so he gave him his hat as a reward, and that was a very good backstory for it. Now, but then 26 years later, in 1938, which is 2 years after Raiders, he now sets out to rescue his father, since he vanished while trying to search for this item called the Holy Grail. So he arrives in Venice, enlists the help of this beautiful academic, but they're not the only ones on the trail, and now some sinister enemies known as the Nazis, of course, they soon come out of the woodwork. What's so good about this film is because this time finding the Holy Grail before the Nazis is very great and new to the table. Still some very epic fight scenes, such as, well, to see where Indiana Jones fights on the Mark tank, and once again, still a good music score from John Williams, and of course, we all know it spawned the infamous "he chose poorly" meme. Some great action sequences, like when Indiana's dad escaping from the castle of Burnwold. Like the first two films, still some memorable action scenes, and very, very likable characters like Henry Jones, Sr., who is Indy's father. And an interesting revelation this time. We get an interesting revelation that instead of being the love interest, also is technically actually the villain of the film. And the scene where Indy decides to scare Seagulls with this umbrella to make the plane crash is very amusing and very funny. Now, is there bad quality? Well, special effects for the plane chase scene were a little mediocre and stuff. But all in all, how would I rank this film? I would rank this film a 9 out of 10. It's a very great sequel. It's technically the second film if you take out Temple, or put Temple before Raiders, it's still the third film, but this is the actual sequel to Raiders, but all in all, it's still some great performances from Harrison Ford, good chemistry between him and Sean Connery too. So all in all, I'd give this one a 9 out of 10, and I would put it in second place behind Raiders of the Lost Ark. And honestly, also, this should have been the end to Indiana Jones. This was a perfect way to end the series, but of course, we all know we got yet another film in the series, and this is easily the worst Indiana Jones film, and that was for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Man, oh man, oh man. Alright, let's just get to the good stuff. Well, Harrison Ford still gives a good performance as Indiana Jones. Marion Silver from Raiders of the Lost Ark does come back. That is kind of a bonus, but there's just so many problems with this film. It's easily the worst one yet, and there's really good reasons. But now, it has a similar reputation to the Star Wars prequels, but while I do like the Star Wars prequels, I could agree Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is not a good film. It was basically, it tried way too hard to be like a sci-fi, and that's not what Indiana Jones is. Yes, Indiana Jones isn't really a sci-fi franchise, and, well, plus the villain in this one, who's played by Cate Blanchett, isn't really even as well written as, like, Belloc, Malaram, or the Nazis, again, in The Last Crusade. It really. Plus, we get probably the worst Indiana Jones character ever, and that's easily Mutt Williams. Or he's, well, spoilers, he's Indy's son. Well, but I'm sure most of you probably have seen the film, but about that stuff. What are the bad stuff? Well, of course, there's the infamous, like, scene where Indiana Jones hides in the fridge. Don't you dare get me started on that scene. That scene is so cringy as hell, I cannot watch it, but actually, it's second cringy. The actually true cringy scene is when Mutt's swinging on the trees with the monkeys. I could never get past that part. If I did a try to cringe challenge on that scene, I would easily fail. And we don't really start with a proper introduction to Indiana Jones. We just basically start off with him actually being captured by the Soviets, and that's not really a good way to open up Indiana Jones. And there's even this plot that never gets resolved, like, he ends up becoming the suspect with the FBI over the scene where where he's forced to help the Soviets get one of the items. But then soon after this chase with them through this town, it's never really touched up again. And of course, there's also the infamous ending with the alien ship. I've already mentioned this. Indiana Jones is not a sci-fi franchise. It's not. I get they were obviously trying to cross over with Star Wars or something, but they're completely separate. Sleep. And honestly, now how would I rank this movie? Well, I would rank it I'd rank it a 5 out of 10. I don't think it's nearly as, well, it's not 4 out of 10 worthy, because there's still some good qualities, like with John Williams' music is still in there, thankfully, and stuff. And it still at least has some kind of connection to Raiders, so at least that's a bonus. But all in all, I would give it a 5 out of 10. It's easily the weakest film, definitely a very bad watch, very forgettable, and very boring too. Now, here's how we would finally rank the series. First place, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Second place, The Last Crusade. Third place, Temple of Doom. And finally, bottom 4, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That is how I rank all 4 of the Indiana Jones films. But anyway, thank you all for watching this video, guys. And if you like this and want to see more, then don't forget to like and subscribe to Movie Lover 120.